On the arrest.
But this soldier and the regiment was clear about the mission.
At least in this instance, we knew who the enemy was. In 1970, you didn't know which side the soldiers were on.
This Sunday on part 1 of the 1990 Attempted Coup series, Garth and Natasha welcome retired Major General Ralph Brown, who will start the series off with an account of his troops being called into action to quell the insurrection. Join us this Sunday from 6:15 p.m. exclusively on I-95.5 FM and live on the Eye on Dependency Facebook page. Eye on Dependency, where every life is a biography, continuing the journey through our history. Tell someone.
Hello world. Hello world. This is www.i955fm.com, Trinidad.
This is reality radio at its best. Eye on Dependency on I-95.5 FM. This is Eye on Dependency with Garth and Natasha. Sundays at 6:15 p.m. on the most influential name in radio, I-95.5 FM.
Good evening, Trinidad and Tobago, and welcome to Eye on Dependency, right here on I-95.5 FM and live on the Eye on Dependency's Facebook page. It's a real pleasure for us to be here this evening once again. Good evening to you, Natasha.
Good evening, Garth. Good evening, Trinidad and Tobago.
And we have a very important program for you this evening with a very important guest in studio with us, none other than retired Major General Ralph Brown. And you all know why we're here this evening. Before we begin the proceedings, we would like to pay a little respect. It's ironic that we are starting with this program this evening, but we think it's fitting for us to pay respect to the passing of retired Warrant Officer Class 1 Ken Doldron, who left for home this morning. So, to observe that, we're going to start by sounding the last post for him before we get on with the proceedings. You know, we are dealing with the job of the Trinidad and Tobago Regiment and the part that they played in quelling the attempted coup. So we think it's fitting that we give Warrant Officer Class 1 Ken Doldron this fitting send-off from our end. We'll keep you posted as information comes to hand on his sending home. So now, the last post. right, thank you very much. It was Friday, a month end, and the Shell Caribbean Cup football match was being played at the National Stadium. There was the usual Friday afternoon lime on Frederick Street, and the debate on corruption was in progress in the House of Representatives. Suddenly, there was a loud explosion at police headquarters in Port of Spain. A car, occupied by armed members of the Jamaat al-Muslimin, drove onto the compound via Sackville Street. The men shot dead the police sentry, stormed out of the car with guns blazing, and in seconds the car exploded. Within minutes, the building became an inferno. The explosion signaled the start of the attempted coup, because simultaneously, the crack of automatic gunfire filled the air as more armed Muslimin gunmen stormed the Parliament chamber of the Red House while the debate on the Tesoro affair was in progress. Simultaneously, the Guardian building on the Abercrombie Street end came under gunfire. So too the Radio 610 building. Minutes earlier, a station wagon had pulled up just outside the Guardian back entrance. Two men came out, opened the back of the vehicle, and handed out automatic weapons from a wooden box, to a group of Muslimin members dressed in black, who had followed in two other cars. After the firing randomly into the Guardian building, the gunmen, still firing, charged into the 610 building and ordered all who were at the entrance of the radio station to lie on the ground. They rushed upstairs to the first floor, where they dropped fire explosives and hurriedly left the building. No one was hurt at either the Guardian or Radio 610 building. On the first floor of the Radio 610, the fire was quickly put out by employees. The gunmen then left to join their colleagues in the Parliament chamber. Meanwhile, as the sound of gunfire came closer to the chamber, Minister Joseph Tony, who was on his feet contributing to the debate, stopped speaking. Then there was total disorder. Spectators in the public gallery began screaming and running. Prime Minister Robinson turned in his seat, while some of his cabinet colleagues on the government front bench ducked for cover. This is just an excerpt from the book In Defense of Our Nation, from the library of retired Fleet Chief Petty Officer Garnet Moore. And I'll be sharing some of these for you as we go along. It was written by Clement Burkitt, and of course researched and compiled and narrated by former and serving members of the Trinidad and Tobago Defense Force. Natasha, let us welcome Major General,
Yes.
retired Ralph Brown. Good evening, sir.
You're very pleased to have you in studio with us.
Good evening, Garth and Natasha. I'm happy to be here. And before I go any further, let me extend my condolences to the family of the late Warrant Officer Doldrun.
Yes.
Doldrun was a pioneer in this regiment, and may his soul rest in peace.
May his soul rest in
Thank you
peace.
for having me this evening.
You're welcome. And also, I forgot, Strago and Dinoon passed away as well. Somebody will text Strago's real name here for me, but we knew him as Strago. He worked at MT, one of the better truck drivers that we had at the time.
Yeah.
Strago and then Dinoon, they passed away too earlier this week. So, gentlemen, reach home safe.
So we proceed with this account of the events of the 27th, that began on the 27th of July 1990, 30 years ago, as we have concluded a series on the events of 50 years ago in April of 1970. And it's fitting, I guess, that we're in 2020 and we have reached these milestones. And you were mentioning to me that even though it's 30 years ago, it feels like yesterday.
That is correct.
Could you take us from...
Before we do that,
Before-
A,
Oh, yes.
Cameron, you have to play A for us. Let us remind people,
Yes, we have a video.
those of you just joining us, we have videos and we have pictures to show you. So you know the usual drill. You have to log on to Facebook page, or our Facebook page and Dependency, to see what we have to show, because we have some pictures of that day and that moment in time. And also we're going to start with this one, A. So we'll put the Major General in the mood, I'm sure.
And be reminded that this is a recording. This is not.
This is a recording.
Not
this
currently
is
happening.
not a current event.
Because we don't want you to tune in and think that it's happening again.
All right. So here we go.
At 6 p.m. this afternoon, the government of Trinidad and Tobago was overthrown. The Prime Minister and members of the cabinet are under arrest. We are asking everybody to remain calm. The revolutionary forces are commanded to control the streets.
The treason.
Where is the Prime Minister tonight to address the nation? Where is he? God has removed him. God has removed the authority, not the power, because no man, including myself, has any power. We have only temporary authority because we all die.
Right, so for those of you youngsters who didn't know what happened on that day, well, we started off with this so that you can be reminded of what happened.
Yes, a lot of people were startled when they turned on their televisions expecting to see the Panorama 7 p.m. newscast and saw Yassin Abu Bakr on their television screens.
Yes. So before
General,
Benton, thank you very much for the information. It's 4623 Staff Sergeant Gordon Allen. He passed away. Retired Staff Sergeant Allen passed away. So we have Bernard Ford and we have a number of soldiers here. We say Captain Derek Lamb, thank you all very much to my batch, Curtis, Dookie, Bernard Ford, and everybody else. Thank you. We said. So it's your time now, Major General. You heard this, but of course you would not have heard this part of it until later on. And so where were you on that day? And tell us what was your reaction and what you decided to do as the man in charge of the force at that time.
Yeah, well, Garth and Natasha, on that day, I was vice president at the time of the Trinidad and Tobago Football Federation. And Trinidad and Tobago was supposed to play Jamaica in the final of the CFU finals. And I was at the National Stadium, and I did the house announcing for the football games at that time. When, at about 6 o'clock, I saw a huge plume of smoke rise from downtown in Port of Spain. I didn't know what it was, but you know the plume of smoke that is associated with an explosion, where it comes out like a mushroom, and
Right.
And I saw that, so I realized it must have been something, a pretty large fire. And just about within a matter of a minute or two, Felix Hernandez, Baldy Hernandez, who was the assistant secretary of the Federation, came running up to the announcer's booth. Now, those of you who know Baldy is a pretty hefty guy.
Mm-hmm.
And under normal circumstances, Baldy would not be running up the stadium steps.
True.
So I immediately said, well, something is wrong here. And he barged into the announcer's booth, where I was doing the house announcements, and informed me that the Muslimim had blown up police headquarters in Port of Spain. In fact, that was the mushroom that I saw go up when the explosion took place. You see, Baldy worked at TSTT at the time, and Nelson Exchange is on the opposite side to the police headquarters. And he got word over his wireless radio of what had happened. So I left together with Baldy. I immediately left the stadium, and I went to Camp Ogden so that I can probably organize whatever that I had to do. And when I got to Camp Ogden with Baldy and Roy Augustus, I don't know if you recall Roy Augustus,
Yes.
Two of them in tow. At the very moment I drove into the camp, Brigadier Theodore, he who was the chief of defense staff, his car was immediately behind mine. So I realized then, well, there's somebody in charge here, let me go back to the stadium and see what soldiers I can muster, knowing that Brigadier Theodore was at camp. So he and I had a very short discussion. And I returned to the stadium and I made an announcement on the house system that for all soldiers, sailors and airmen to report to the front of the stadium. And we commandeered, I would think about 30, 40, 50 soldiers turned up, and sailors and airmen. And we commandeered the Caribbean truck that was at the stadium waiting to remove the empties after the football match. And the driver took us to Camp Ogden, and the others who had vehicles made their way to Camp Ogden. By then, Brigadier Joseph, who was a major at the time, he too was in camp at Camp Ogden. And we were able to muster a small group of soldiers. I think it must have been in the 30s, 30, 35 soldiers, and he left to go and try and establish a cordon around the Red House. Because, as we knew also that the Red House had been stormed by the Muslimin. So Brigadier Joseph went off and at that task. That must have been around 6:30 or thereabouts. And myself and Brigadier Theodore, we were conversing in Camp Ogden as to how we were going to approach this when 7 o'clock came. Now we knew that TTT, which was the only television station at the time in Trinidad, carried excerpts from the inside the Red House. And not knowing what was going on, all we knew is that the Muslimin had stormed the building. We didn't know numbers, we didn't know anything else. And that they had blown up police headquarters. And so we thought we would look at the news and see if TTT is carrying any of this thing. And to our surprise, the newscast did not come on as scheduled at 7 o'clock. There was this a sign that came on for the Panorama News, and just the sign was on. And true enough, about 10 minutes later, we saw that clip that you just showed where Abu Bakr said he had overthrown the government of Trinidad and Tobago. And for the first time then we realized that he had taken over TTT. Because, and so we now had another situation that has developed. And we had two separate situations. Brigadier Joseph in the meantime had gone out into Port-of-Spain, and you would not believe the speed with which he was able to set out an outer cordon and then squeeze the cordon in. And he had actually worked his way to within 30, 40 meters of the Red House and had it totally surrounded by 8 p.m. You're talking just 2 hours, literally 2 hours after the coup started. And I would think just an hour after he had left Camp Ogden, little more than an hour after he had left Camp Ogden, to have established a cordon around, a wide cordon, and then to squeeze it in, to work with himself within mere meters of the Red House. And as far as I was concerned, the coup was over at that time, at that point in time. There was no way out for them. During that exercise, 3 of our soldiers got shot. Lieutenant Telesford, Sergeant New, and I can't recall the private soldier's name. Fortunately for us, none of their injuries were fatal. And they were taken to hospital and they were taken care of, very good care in the hospital. But no one realizes that there was actually a gun battle going on. And 3 of our soldiers had been shot. And
this is what a location? TTT?
At the Red House.
Red House.
At the Red House. The TTT, we only knew about it at 7 o'clock news.
Right.
Right? Colonel Vidal was in charge of the 1st Battalion at the time, and his headquarters was also at Camp Ogden, and he too by then had come into camp. And so I gave him instructions that he should muster as many men as he could and then deal with the situation around TTT. The situation around TTT was a much more difficult situation to handle. Initially we didn't have very many soldiers, because soldiers were coming in, trickling in. And we had a company of men out in the Ecclesville forest doing marijuana eradication exercise, and they were literally in the jungle, and that it took them several hours before we could radio them and get them to walk out of the jungle, then join the vehicles and get back to Camp Ogden, by which time it would have been around 2-3 o'clock Saturday morning. And then we had what we thought were sufficient men. But in the meantime, soldiers were trickling in and started to come into Camp Ogden.
Well, we will have an account of that exercise from W1 Ramnath, who we retired W1 Ramnath. He was on that exercise.
Okay. All right. So then Colonel Vidal had to address his mind to the TTT situation. As I said, it was a much more difficult situation because they were having exchanges between the Muslim who were outside of TTT, and they had also taken over the Radio Trinidad station. All right? And so there were exchanges, and we had to literally fight our way in. And he did not have enough men to establish a wide cordon. So he asked me whether we could get the police to help. And by then also the Commissioner of Police had come into Camp Ogden. So I went to the Commissioner. I said, Commissioner, look, this is the situation.
Who was he at the time, sir?
It was Acting Commissioner Mr. Taylor.
Taylor.
Assistant Commissioner of Police Taylor.
Taylor.
He's deceased now, but he was acting commissioner. Jules Bernard was the commissioner, but he was out of the country at the time. So Colonel Vidal, with whatever little troops he had, before he could squeeze in, had established a wide cordon around the thing. I think the Oval, Elizabeth Street and the Oval, Sinclair Avenue, down Maraval Road, not Maraval Road, Cipriani Boulevard.
Okay.
And he did not have anybody to put in Tragreed Road because those were the parameters I had given him. And then once he had done that, then to squeeze in, and had to fight their way in as I was suggesting to you. So I asked the Commissioner, and the Commissioner said yes. So we thought, Colonel Vidal now is on the ground together with Brigadier Antoine, I think, and one or two other Colonel Clark and others. They were junior officers at that time, so they were dealing with that. In the meantime, Brigadier Joseph, as I said, within an hour had the Red House situation under control. But the TTT one, as I said, it took us some time. I went back to the stadium again while the game was going on, while the Jamaica game was going on, because I knew that the TTT, they were carrying the football match. They were taping the football match to be carried. And so I knew they had outside equipment. Then Abu Bakr appeared on TTT screen. So I wanted to knock him off of the screen because that's the reason he took over TTT, so that he can address the nation and talk. And that's the reason he firebombed 610 radio. And that's the reason he took over the only other radio station that we had. So he would have commanded the airwaves. So I wanted to get him off of the television in the first place. So I went back to the stadium, spoke with Bernard Pantin, who was the program director at the time. And Bernard suggested, yes, there's a way to do it. He spoke to the technicians. And we said, okay, fine. Collapse your equipment and meet us at the bottom of we were going up to Cumberland Hill. He said that the transmitter station site was up at Cumberland Hill, just beyond Fort George. So I said, meet us at the bottom of Fort George Road to get up to the Cumberland station. And I went back to Camp Ogden, collected Minister Pantin and Minister Myers. And before that, I went personally to Minister Pantin's home and brought him in. He reluctantly came because I was trying to... You see, Abu Bakr had said at that 7 o'clock broadcast that he had, that they were in control and they had taken over the government. But clearly there were ministers who would not have been in Parliament, who were senators, would not have been in the Parliament itself. So I said, well, all right, let me start bringing them in. So I went to Clive Pantin's home. I knew him personally. And he came with me. And I put him in the Camp Ogden. And to his credit, Minister Myers came by himself. Nobody brought him. He just turned up in Camp Ogden.
Lincoln Myers.
And I sent the same Baldy Hernandez and Roy Augustus, and together with Ivan Williams, to find Minister Atwell. All right? He was the Minister of Energy, I think it was. So they went to where he lived in Cascade, and they eventually found him after looking for him for several hours. He wasn't at home. But they eventually found him and brought him in. So we had at least 3 ministers there. And this was later in Saturday morning. Now we're talking Saturday morning, but I just gave you that to let you understand how come Minister Myers and Minister Pantin was able to go with me to Cumberland Hill. So we went to Cumberland Hill. We debussed at somewhere before we got to Fort George itself, and then we worked our way on. We went on foot tactically because we didn't know whether he also had, taken over the transmitter site. Clearly forgot that. So we worked ourselves tactically, and we got to the Cumberland Hill, the transmitter site, and we blew they didn't have the keys to get into the cabin, the area where the transmitter equipment was. So we shot that off. We used an SLR. One shot took it off. And we were able to set up use the outside broadcasting equipment that TTT had, filming the football match. Put it on his shoulder, and I don't know if you have a clip of that, but most of the television stations have it now because I gave it to them. And from there, first Minister Panting, then Minister Myers addressed the nation, and it's a very hazy picture. It's very hazy. I don't know if you have it, but and then at the end of it, I broadcast, and I indicated that contrary to what Abu Bakr had said at the 7 o'clock newscast, that the army was with him and this one and that, and which infuriated all of us, by the way, who were at Camp Ogden when we saw that. And that contrary to that, what he had said, that the army we had not collaborated with, nor do we intend to collaborate with the perpetrators of this crime. And I advised them to keep listening, and the ministers from time to time would keep them apprised of the situation as it developed.
So you have clips of that as well?
Say again?
You have that footage too?
Oh, yes.
Okay, because we never saw that footage, and we
Oh no, I gave it. I had. If I would have brought it for me, if I'm coming. And actually, the television stations, because they didn't have 610. TV6 and all these other thorough television stations that we have now.
So TTT
and most
may
of
have
the footage, most of the footage, I gave it to them. They copied it.
Okay.
So that's available.
If you're just joining us, you're listening to Dependency, and we are having a discussion with Major General Ralph Brown, retired, of his role and the role that the regiment played at quelling that attempted coup in 1990.
Yeah, so to continue. So in the meantime now, as I said, Brigadier Colonel Vidal was really engaging the Jamaat in an exchange of gunfire. And TTT was a little more difficult to think than the Red House. The Red House, as I said, by 8 o'clock that was finished. But we well into Saturday night now, early Saturday morning at sunrise. And about mid-morning, we got a report that the Woodbrook police station was under fire from Jamaat al-Muslimin. And my operations officer at the time was Colonel Derrick. I don't know, I'm sure you remember Colonel Derrick.
Of course.
He was a major at the time. He was my operations officer. And he hurriedly put together a small posse of soldiers and took off to deal with this situation. And in dealing with the situation, he realized that there were no policemen on Tragreed Road, which is where we had asked the police the night before to hold Tragreed Road for us. And that was how they were able to come out of the cordon, that the other three sides that had been established by Colonel Vidal and his men, and go and attack the Woodbrook police station. And then Colonel Derrick was able to force them to retreat back into the TTT building, and it's then he realized there was nobody, there no policemen on Tragreed Road. Right. So we now had to establish the full cordon. By then, as I said, soldiers were streaming into camp from wherever they were. Most of them, some of them not stationed in outposts, stationed in other camps. They were coming to Camp Ogden because by then they realized that Camp Ogden was the hub of activity. So we are now into Saturday. The Saturday evening, right, with Colonel Vidal still having this interchange between the Muslimim in the TTT building and in the streets surrounding Marval.
So you're talking about actual exchange of gunfire?
Oh yes.
And they were well armed and prepared for a gunfight.
Let's put it this way: they were armed.
They were armed.
It depends on.
They were prepared.
It's all relative. It's all
engage,
relative. Of course, they were prepared to but not. I'll get to that point at another stage.
All right.
Stick a pin.
Yes.
Don't lose your train of thought. You listen to Independency. We take a quick break, and then return. Those of you who are just joining us, we'll start with that video again. And then we'll continue with Major General Ralph Brown right here on 995.5. And of course, you can join us on our Facebook page, Independency. We'll be back. Stay right there.
This is reality radio at its best.
And don't give me no attitude there.
You have sheer no manners, boy. I wish I had your touch, boy.
You have to groom them. First, you have to target them. Scope them out. See if they have low self-esteem. Family problems, you know. Then you move in and gain the trust.
I like your glasses.
After that, you feel a need. Some of them like nice things like fancy phones, hairdos, clothes, food. It have ones who only looking for somebody to care and listen to the problems. You feel me? What's important though? You have to isolate them from the people. Let them believe it's all about you and them.
I care about you.
Then you get through.
Nice.
Look one right here. Try thing now.
A message from the counter-trafficking unit of the Ministry of National Security.
Give me my phone.
What are you doing taking them kind of pictures? I'll tell mommy.
And I'll tell her you invaded my privacy.
Privacy? When you send those pics, you lose all privacy. It's like setting up a billboard with your naked pics for the world to see.
Those pictures are for my boyfriend's eyes only, and he'll never do that to me.
Yes, he can, or one of his friends or family, or someone can steal his phone. Sending naked pics can open you up to embarrassment for you, your family, and friends. You can be harassed by bullies. Your pics can be uploaded to websites and seen by everybody, even the wrong people, sex offenders. It can also affect you getting a good job in the future. Once those pictures go out, you can never get them back.
Okay, I'll tell my boyfriend to delete them, and I'll delete these. I'm glad I have a smart little sister.
I'm still telling mommy.
I'm Alicia, and you are listening to Eye on Dependency with God and Natasha on I-95.5 FM, Trinidad and Tobago. Don't traffic drugs, it's not worth it.
At 6 p.m. this afternoon, the government of Trinidad and Tobago was overthrown. The Prime Minister and members of the cabinet are under arrest. We are asking everybody to remain calm. The revolutionary forces are commanded to control the streets.
Treason.
Where is the Prime Minister tonight to address the nation? Where is he? God has removed him. God has removed the authority, not the power, because no man, including myself, has any power. We have only temporary authority because we all die.
Thank you for staying with us. This is Eye on Dependency, and we are talking about the incidents of July 1990 with retired Major General Ralph Brown.
Retired Chief Brinsley McKay sends his regards, sir. Retired Brigadier General Anthony Philip Spencer also sends his regards. And of course, we have some old soldiers who now outside and some of them here. Anna Aparicio sends her regards as well. Remember young Aparicio?
Yes,
right.
I do. Yes.
Yeah, she was wet behind the ears when she was called into action that time. So tell us.
Yes.
So we are
on Saturday. But I went to Cumberland Hill a second time together with the acting president at the time, Mr. Eamon Carter. He was the president of the Senate and he was acting president. President Hassan Ali was out of the country at the time. So we did go back to Cumberland Hill where we made another announcement where the state of emergency, 24-hour state of emergency was declared. So we're back to Saturday. We are now on Saturday. And that incident with the police at Woodbrook Police Station being attacked and how that was repelled. And we now on to Saturday evening. Sometime on Saturday evening, must have been around 8 p.m. Minister Atwell came to me and said he would like me to accompany himself and Mr. Charles Gargano, who was the American ambassador, to Piarco Airport to meet an incoming military aircraft coming from the United States. Mr. Gargano himself was out of the country, but found his way back within 24 hours back into Trinidad, I think via Grenada. He went to Grenada by air and then took a boat and came across and was back in Trinidad within 24 hours of this incident happening. And so I took along Major Derrick with me, who was my operations officer and in fact was my right hand throughout this. He was a tower of strength for me.
And he was in charge of Special Forces?
Yes, at one time he was in charge of Special Forces, but at the time of the coup he was the operations officer.
Okay.
And in fact that Friday, the 27th of July, was his last working day.
Wow.
And he had actually turned in his kit, and he lived opposite the Camp Ogden in Flagstaff Hill. And he had actually turned in his kit when his driver, Corporal Lopez, heard on the news what had happened, that transpired at the Red House.
Are you serious?
Yes.
Never
and
knew
ran back to
get his kit for him.
to Colonel Derrick. And he too came into Camp Ogden. So, but as I said, he was throughout the 7 days, the 6 day, he was my right hand. I depended on him for a lot of stuff because you see, as a Brigadier Theodore was the chief of defense staff, as head of the regiment at the time, we were thinking strategically, all right. And there are others down below who carry out these instructions that we are given. And I had every confidence in the officers in the regiment, and I'm very proud of all of them who reacted on that occasion. To a man, they reacted. So we are back to Saturday night when I took along Major Derrick with me, and we picked the U.S. ambassador up at the embassy, and Minister Atwell and himself went in the ambassador's car, Colonel Derrick and myself, and we took along an escort to escort the convoy, the 4, 5 or 6 vehicles that we were going in. And we went to the other side of it was the old airport, not this new airport. So the other side was the cargo side, and the terminal was on the southern side. So we went to the other side, and we had to clear the runway because soldiers and the air wing from the Coast Guard had closed Piarco Airport. Had physically closed it by putting vehicles on the runway so that no plane could land or take off. So we had to clear that first. And we were looking in the direction where the planes normally come from over the Gulf, from the west, landing at Piarco, when we suddenly heard this roar behind us. It was the aircraft, the aircraft coming from the United States, which landed from the opposite direction.
Oh, wow.
And so the air traffic controller, I suppose, told him to taxi to the northern side of the airport, where we met them. We went aboard, myself, Minister Atwell, the ambassador, and Colonel Derrick, Major Derrick as he then was, went aboard the aircraft. It was a DC-8 aircraft, and our DC-8 is the equivalent of the McDonnell Douglas DC-8 is the equivalent of a 707, a Boeing 707. Correct. It's a wide-bodied aircraft. It holds 300 people. So it was a DC-8. So we went aboard the aircraft, and the front of the aircraft, what you refer to as first class now, that was configured like an office, very much like we are here, with a desk, and you sat around it. And we were joined there by another guy from the U.S. He was in civis, and we had a discussion. And they asked me whether we needed help. And I said, no, we did not need any help. We can handle the situation. Because by then, as I told you, by 8 p.m. on the Friday, we had the Red House under control. And sometime on the Saturday, we had the TTT situation under control when we realized that the police, when we had established the code. And I said no. And so the discussions went on and back and forth, and they must have asked me at least a dozen times whether I needed help. It was almost as if they were begging me to say yes.
They wanted to drop troops down.
And I resisted. I indicated to them that, so eventually I said, well, look, you can help me if you have any eavesdropping equipment.
Right.
Because I would like to know what is going on inside there. And we'll come back to that, because I think I skipped the part that Canon Nolly Clark played, and remind me to get back to that, which began early on Saturday morning.
Yes.
Very early that Saturday morning. So I needed to get some eavesdropping equipment to see if we can pick up on anything that was happening inside the Red House and the television station. And eventually, when they realized that, I was adamant that we didn't need any help. Incidentally, Minister Atwell was also asking me if I was sure that I know what I was, that I didn't need help. They then asked whether if they could allow 4 or 5 of their people to disembark. And I said, yes, I have no objection to that. And the same individual who was representing, I take it, the U.S. government at the time, he came ashore, and four other people, 2 women and 2 men. So there were now 5 of them, and they all came off with radios, military radios, in their hands. So I realized they were communications people, and they can talk on those radios back to Washington, as indeed they were talking. So they came back, the aircraft left, and I gather it staged in Barbados. I went to Barbados. Either Barbados or Puerto Rico, I'm not quite sure which, but I think it was Barbados. And the 5 of them came. 1 stayed with Brigadier Theodore, the guy who I recognize as the leader of the group. He stayed with Brigadier Theodore. I physically inserted 2 of them in the Colonial Life building, which was right opposite the Red House. And the other 2 stayed with me. So the leader stayed with Brigadier Theodore. The 2 stayed with me, and 2 I physically inserted 2 in the Clico building. And so that was the only involvement of the Americans during this thing. Because once the Muslim had surrendered, within an hour or 2, couple hours, they were gone. The same aircraft came and took them away. So they were here, and I have no doubt that they were passing back information to Washington.
You sure they weren't CIA?
Well, no, I think they were special forces.
Okay.
I think they were American special forces, but communications people. So, so I told you to remind me that to come back to the role played by Canon Nolly Clark. I think when the Muslim in the Red House, as indeed in TTT, realized that the Red House was surrounded and there was no way out for them, and we'll come to the 3 solutions that we had to that problem. We'll come to that later on. When they realized that they were surrounded and there was no way out for them, they asked for to have some dialogue with those on the outside, with people on the outside. I think they had they had shot ASP George. He was killed. He was a special branch officer assigned to the parliament, and he was killed. And they used his radio, I think. He had a radio with him, and placed it to the mouth of the prime minister, who had been hog-tied back to back with Mr. Richardson, and ordered him to call the troops off to and that's when he's alleged to have made those famous words, attack with full force. Yes. Now, we didn't hear that because it was a police radio.
Right.
And at that point, both he and Minister Richardson were shot.
Yes.
And, so they then asked for somebody to come in and they approached me and asked, I think they asked for Canon Nolly Clark, by the way, by name. And at the time, I think Canon Nolly Clark was allied to what was the name of the grouping of trade unionists that was around that time. And so they asked for him. I said, yes, let him go in. Because I wanted to find out what was going on in there. The only way to find out was for somebody to go in and come back and tell me. Because all we knew is that they're taking over the Red House. I didn't know what types of weapons they had, how many, what the numbers were, how they were dressed, what they were doing, what they were saying. So I had no objection to Canon Nolly Clark going in. One or two ministers had objected. A couple of other ministers had also come into Camp Ogden, by the way. And I said, no, let the man go. Inadvertently, he'll come back out, he'll tell me what was going on in there, and I would have a better idea of what I'm dealing with in terms of the weaponry, what they had, and that sort of thing. And true enough, he went in, and he was just an emissary. A lot of people didn't think that he, thought that he was part of this thing. Canon Nolly Clark, I have no doubt in my mind, was not a part of this thing. He went in, and he came back out. I debriefed him, quite apart from what information he took to the ministers who were on the outside. I debriefed him because I wanted to get some idea of what we're dealing with. And I well recall what he said. He said there's some little boys in there with some big guns. And he put his hand up in the air like that to show that the guns were taller than these little boys. And I realized for the first time that I'm dealing now with rifles.
Yes.
Now remember, I know they had a propensity to blow up buildings and to use remote control to blow up explosives.
Right.
How much of that they may have been put inside the Red House or the television station, I don't know. As a matter of fact, they used it to great effect. If you read Raoul Pantin's book on the coup, you would see that they had wired up a box and told them it was explosives. And as I say, we had this knowledge that they can detonate this thing by remote control.
Yeah.
So Canon Clark, so for the first time now, I know what I was dealing with. We're still in Saturday night now. After we had come back from the airport, Minister Pantin came to me and he said, look, because I was down in one part, if you remember Camp Ogden, Garth,
yes, sir.
The offices at one way and then there's an officers' mess down at the other end of the same building.
Yes.
So the ministers were down there and I and Brigadier Theodore, we were on the office side of things. And Minister Pantin came to me and said, that a lot of the ministers didn't agree with the situation, that how the thing was going on. Because I had recommended that we try to resolve this thing with as less bloodshed as possible. And I recommended that they negotiate a way out of this thing. Because by then it had become a hostage situation.
Yes.
Bilal knew he was surrounded. He had the ministers in there. All right. The TTT building, we were still working our way toward it. And Abu Bakr asked to speak to Archbishop Pantin, of all people. And so I asked Minister Pantin if he knew where his brother was. He said, yes, he just spoke to him. He's in Archbishop's house. So I sent a posse of a patrol of soldiers and brought him in. We brought him into Camp Ogden and said, put him in the officers' mess there. And then I said to myself, well, the next person they will call for is Bishop Abdullah. So I sent another group of soldiers to find Bishop Abdullah, which they found. They found him, and they brought him into Camp Ogden also. And Dean Nolly Clark had gone in. So when Minister Panton came to me and said that he didn't think that, a couple of his colleagues didn't think that this negotiation thing was going to work out, and, that we should think of another way of resolving this issue. Now, I had given them the 3 solutions to the problem. One was to blow the building down. The second one was to storm the building. And the third one, which is what I recommended, was to negotiate a way out of this. Because to adopt the other 2 situations would have created a lot of bloodshed.
But I understand that Special Forces was willing, ready, and able under the watch of Major Barry Thomas to carry out that exercise.
Option 2.
Yes. Don't forget, we had different plans being organized.
Right.
Right? And you are quite right. The Special Forces were by then all of them were mustered in Camp Ogden. And what we didn't know were where all the entrances and exits to the Red House. We wanted to know how we could get into there. And we had a military draftsman. And as I said, the acting president used to be the chief clerk in the Senate for I don't know many years, since independence. And he knew every entrance, even the entrances that the public wouldn't normally use. So he was able to, with the help of this military draftsman, to make a sketch of the Red House building and all the entrances. So we knew that if we had to get into the building, we knew exactly what we would do. And there are other issues which I wouldn't want to bring up here, means of how we could have gotten into there.
If you're just joining us, you're listening to Independency, and we are speaking with retired Major General Ralph Brown, and he's giving his account of his troops' response to the attempted coup in 1990.
Yeah. So the Special Forces, you're quite right. We had a mock-up of the Red House, and Barry Thomas, and I think there was an officer there, not Archie Phillips.
Right.
With 2 of them, and then the forces were there, and they were working on the tactics together with Major Derrick, who was the operations officer, and they were handling that aspect of things. So as I said, the 3 options: one was to blow the place down, the second one was to storm the building, and the third one, which is the one I recommended, was to negotiate a way out of this. Because the other 2, believe you me, Garth and Natasha, there would have been a lot of blood spilled. There were 114 of the Jamaat alone. All of them would have died. No doubt in my mind. How many of the hostages? Well, at one stage there might have been more than 100 hostages in both occasions. How many of them we would have been able to save? I don't know. We ourselves, as a soldier, you would know, we could have lost 1 or 2.
Of course.
Right? But if we were prepared to do any of those 3 things.
Well, as former minister, then Jennifer Johnson, she, and who the public will hear from in coming broadcasts, she told us that they were made to kneel, and because the Jamaat was preparing for that storm of the Red House, and everybody had a rifle to their head, that they told them once they started, they said the Jamaat told them that the first signal would be the lights being cut. And then they say once the lights get cut, then shoot everybody in the head. Right. So they were prepared.
Yeah, so there you go. So all the hostages,
so you made a
majority of hostages would have died.
Yes.
Yeah.
And as I said, that's a lot of blood, and that would have been on my conscience for the rest of my life. I was head of the army. I had to make that decision. So anyhow, Clive Panton came to me and said that some of the ministers didn't think this negotiation thing was going to work. And I do like I'm doing now. You notice I'm taking my wallet out. And in my wallet here, I still have it. Some 30-something years ago, I was trained in hostage negotiations in Canada.
Right.
By Dr. Harvey Schlossberg, who undoubtedly was probably the world's leading foremost expert on hostage negotiations. And I did a course with him at RCMP in college in Ottawa in 1986. So you're talking 34 years ago. And at the end of the course, he gave us each his business card. And he said, if you ever find yourself in a situation where you need advice, give me a call. So when Minister Pantin came to me, I went into my wallet, as I'm doing now. I have his card right here. I can show it to you. And I called him. I'm not sure he's alive. You're talking a long time ago now. But at the time he was alive. That was just 4 years after I had done the course. And lo and behold, he was viewing it on CNN. By then CNN also had come in. How they got here, I don't know. But CNN was here, and he was actually viewing snippets of it on CNN, on the broadcast in CNN. And I said to him, do you remember me? And he said, yes, how can I forget you? You were you were the only non-white person on the course. And we had a good chuckle at that. And he convinced me, he said to me, look, no problem. From what I am seeing, this thing is being handled correctly. It's only a matter of time and they're going to surrender. Right? Because, by now we're talking, this was Saturday night into Sunday morning. Mm-hmm. And so I asked him if he would speak with the Minister Pantin. So I put Minister Pantin on the phone, and he and Minister Pantin spoke. And he convinced Minister Pantin that we had adopted the correct stand. And everything would work out. Minister Pantin went back to his colleagues, and he would have told them what Dr. Skarsberg had told him. And I think thereafter, there was no pressure on myself to do other than the negotiation.
So actually, what you're saying here then for the listening audience, that the ministers, some of them were in favor of storming the building.
I didn't say that.
Well, they weren't convinced that the negotiation...
But they only would...
No, but I understand what God is saying. Yeah. I am not going to say that
they wanted to bring it to
they wanted to bring it to an end.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
Well, I can tell you as much. One minister actually said to me, do what I have to do.
Right. The final option.
Meaning that if it meant storming the building, and one minister told me that, and I wouldn't call any names, I wouldn't embarrass anybody. But so anyhow, so this thing dragged on and on and on, and people went back and forth. And there was a lot of pressure. There was a lot of pressure. Having said that, there was a lot of pressure on the ministers outside.
Yes.
Because Abu Bakr had been on the television saying this thing could be easy. They have an amnesty. Because that was one of the documents, the two documents that Dr. Nolly Clark brought out of the Red House with him. Yeah. And he also brought Minister Dukaran and Minister Devines. Devines had been shot, his heel had been shot off, and he bled to death. He didn't die in the Red House, but he was brought out and he died. Subsequently died a few hours after that, taking him to hospital. Right? And so this thing dragged on for 6 days, and eventually they surrendered. They insisted on coming out with their arms, and listen to this. They wanted to come. One of the things were that they would come out of the Red House and the TTT with their arms, allowed to come out with their arms, go back to the mosque, pray, lay down their arms, and then the army can come and collect the weapons.
Madness.
And that was one of the suggestions. Another suggestion was that they form part of a government, and I still remember seeing here in Abu Bakr on the television saying they would have elections within 90 days, free from fear and free and fair and free from fear. And but he wanted to be Minister of National Security. He wanted to be my boss, actually. But I would have none of that. And as I said, they surrendered. I was not a party, neither was Brigadier Theodore a party to any discussion to have an amnesty, to offer an amnesty. Even though I heard when Canon Nolly Clark came out, he spoke a word. And from the time I heard the word amnesty, I withdrew myself and I left, because I well remember the mutiny, and the mutiny of 1970, which you carried so effectively earlier this year, where the plea of condonation was used.
Yes.
And condonation in the military is akin to amnesty in civil life, And to this day, I cannot understand how, in heaven's name, that the Privy Council could hold that the amnesty originally was valid. They invalidated the amnesty by making further demands on the government. However, they ought not to be charged again for treason. Now that baffles
many people. Many.
On the one hand, you're saying it was valid, they invalidated it, but then they ought not to be rearrested. And the only conclusion I can arrive at is that Britain had abolished the death penalty, and the penalty for treason, the only penalty for treason is death.
Yep.
So having accepted an amnesty suggests that you've done what you're alleged to have done.
Yes.
So that they would have been, but I have no problem. I accepted the verdict of the Privy Council because that's the system of governance that we operate under, and I think it's the best in the world. And if that's the decision, well then so be it.
If you're just joining us, you're listening to Dependency, and we are having a step-by-step account of the regiment's role under the watch of Major General Ralph Brown, who is now retired, but he has agreed to join us in studio here to tell us of that experience. And we have footage of course of that, the surrender and all that. We'll show you in a while. And of course some footage from in and around the action that some of you, so all you youngsters who weren't born yet, you will get a chance to see. And we have more footage to show you as this series continue, so look out for that. You're in your mind, you are a soldier, born, bred and caked. You're prepared for this. You felt that your troops did well?
Exceedingly well. I said earlier tonight, I'm proud of my officers. All the officers in the regiment are well-trained officers. They're all trained abroad before they're made officers. And they do subsequent training, advanced training, and I am proud of every single soldier. All the soldiers, to a man but one, responded. We didn't even have to call them in. They all responded for duty. Many of them came to Camp Ogden, and as I said, we broke into lockers and got uniforms and put them in. And had we not done that, Brigadier Joseph, I challenge many larger armies, much larger than ours, to have got together the men, right, deploy and contain that within the hour that Brigadier Joseph did with his men. I challenge many larger armies to have done that.
In your estimation, how long did the engagement last with the Red House and your troops?
Oh, that was over by 8 o'clock.
Okay.
Oh, yes.
The exchange of gunfire?
Yeah, the one at TTT was
longer.
The one at TTT, there was not a lot of exchanges of gunfire between on the outside, on the periphery of the Red House, yes, before Brigadier Joseph was able to squeeze the cordon in. Sure, they had some running battles, and that's where the 3 soldiers got shot. But once they had been surrounded, Brigadier Joseph had 2 sides, I think the northern side and on the eastern side, and Calvin Bishop did the southern side and the western side. And once that was the TTT building was a little more difficult, because we didn't realize that he had also taken over TTT until the 7 o'clock newscast. Otherwise, we might have been able to muster some troops earlier to get that done.
Well, we've interviewed the Brigadier, he's now Brigadier General Antoine, and also Major General Carl Alfonso as well. So we will hear from them too as well on their account of the Major. Brigadier General Anthony Philip Spencer once again says, please convey my highest regards to Major General Brown and my congratulations to him on recognition with the Shagonia Medal Gold among the recipients of the 2019 National Awards Honours List. Please also convey my deepest condolences to the family of Warrant Officer Class 1 Ken Doldron on the passing, and to the national military community. serving retired and their families on the passing of one of our pioneers. So that's from our ambassador to Washington, D.C., Brigadier General Anthony Philip Spencer. Also, let me read this for you. Now, I don't know who this person, Facebook, but the person goes by the name of Ben Nell. I had first informed then Lieutenant Colonel Vidal by phone, as there was no cell phone, obviously, that Lieutenant Telesford had been shot at the corner of Henry and Duke Street from a drive-by vehicle. The police, who were informed of certain things that needed to be done, were the biggest cowards. However, they eventually did the certain things which prevented an escalation of security breach. I also was in contact with Dennis McComey, who was a champion even outside his broadcast. One day I will tell my story, but I still get very emotional. So that's from someone who obviously was part of the...
A soldier?
Yes, because he's saying some of the things that he was. There was also another soldier. I think he was a signaller.
He was in the Clico building when it happened, and he reported by phone to Camp Ogden to Colonel Vidal a ball-by-ball commentary on what was taking place at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And he stayed with I can't recall his name now, but he was a signaller, and he stayed in the Colonial Life building and was in contact with Camp Ogden, passing information to and from. And I told him to stay where he was,
right,
but to deal with Colonel Vidal, who was the commanding officer of the troops on the ground.
We have some youngsters listening from the St. James Police Youth Club, of course, and from the Citizen Troop Program.
Right.
Thank you all for joining us. And okay, somebody suggesting it's probably Colonel Bennett.
Bennett?
Neil.
Yes, could be.
Yeah. So they're working incognito on Facebook. Okay. Neil Bennett, good evening to you. Thank you very much for joining, if that is you. So, Benton Williams, I'm saying after you. Okay. So what we do, we'll take a break, Tash?
Yeah, I was just gonna give a little anecdotal response to the Major Generals when you talk about the Americans' involvement in the whole affair. I remember my brother was in the army at the time, Nunez, W1 retired, and I was we were staying fairly close to TTT. We were in a building on Queen's Park West, so we were hearing all of the gunfire and stuff. And my birthday is on the 31st, so I remember him bringing us at some point before then some army rations. So we ate U.S. Army rations for a couple of days.
For the first time.
And somehow my sister managed to make me a birthday cake with no flour, no ingredients. I got a birthday cake though, so that's one of my memories of that time. I was going on 15.
Well, I would say it was a red letter day for Trinidad and Tobago.
Indeed.
But I always like to throw the cat among the pigeons, and I like to use, as a radio journalist, to balance the scale a bit, and I'll do that in a while. But let's take a quick break, Cameron.
Mm-hmm.
And when we come back, we'll go through the pictures that we have for you here this evening. So those of you, especially you youngsters who did not know what happened, you didn't have a clue what happened on that day.
An entire generation has passed with
no
one not experiencing or knowing about these events. So it's very important for you to pay attention, youngsters.
Right. Benton saying the soldier was Bikeman Williams, Wires.
Mm-hmm.
That's the person who you probably spoke about doing the communication. Wires. Right.
I remember the name.
Right. So let's take that quick break. We'll be back, and we have more interesting stuff for you. Stay right there. I'm Corey Gills. Good evening to you. I'll read your message in a while. We'll take a...
This is Eye on Dependency with Garth and Natasha. Sundays at 6:15 p.m. on the most influential name in radio, I-95.5.
Ah, boy. Feel like going out and buy myself a senorita tonight.
Nah. You might be promoting slavery.
Slavery? Mm-hmm. What are you talking about?
Hey, modern day slavery, or human trafficking is just what some of these people just do. You know some of these women were tricked to come here? Some are held against their will, abused, and even beaten. Most times the girls don't even see any of the money that is paid for them. And every night, they just have to come out looking nice and sexy for somebody like you. Human trafficking is a serious problem and a serious crime. Persons who solicit commercial sex services may be contributing to human trafficking. A message from the Counter-Trafficking Unit of the Ministry of National Security.
Hola, my name is Elena. Well, it's actually not my real name. You don't really care, do you? All you care about is want to pay your money to my boss that I look pretty, smell nice, smile for you, and let you have good time, enjoying yourself and doing to me whatever you want to do for the money you paid. What you don't see or know is that I don't get any part of the money you paid. My boss takes all of it. I am forced to work, taking as many clients as my boss tells me to. I am beaten, made to take drugs, and I cannot leave this kind of work on my own. I am a victim of human trafficking. Please, por favor, help me.
Hi, I'm Danielle and you're listening to Eye on Dependency, where every life is a biography, Trinidad and Tobago. Don't traffic drugs, it's not worth it.
Thank you for staying with us, and let's go to those images right away, because I would like to take some calls as well, and then we have some comments. Cameron, you'll pull up those comments on Facebook page for me, please, right, when we get to that. But we're gonna, if you go live on Facebook now on our page, and Dependency, you will see some of the footage from that fateful week. And what, so this, the first picture up on your screen would be Minister Joseph Tony while he was on his legs in the Parliament.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And you know, I always look for that clip where he was showing talk for the opposition. Who is a leader? Yeah. Who is a leader?
That's it.
Yeah, but they never got that part. They only started from when he was reading from the document, or when he was saying, you know, it is sad. But I always would like to get my hands on that.
Tape,
you have it? Okay. I would like that to see that when he says, who is a leader? You're not giving Pekong. You could go to the next slide, Chopin.
Yes, and we hope to have Mr. Tony in studio as well to give his account.
Yes. No, there's a picture of police headquarters.
On fire.
And what it looked like, it's on fire here. Did you know what kind of explosive they used, sir? Was it C4 or?
It's a plastic explosive.
Plastic.
Yeah. But they detonated it. They walked up to PC McLeod, who was directing traffic. You know that archway?
Yes.
And they always had a policeman 24/7, and they direct traffic in and out of police headquarters on Sackville Street.
Yes.
PC McLeod, 6 o'clock. That poor police constable directing traffic. They walked up to him, had the weapon in a paper bag, and asked him for directions to Sackville and Richmond Street, I think it was. And as he turned his head that way, they shot him dead. And drove the cab into the courtyard of the police headquarters, ran out and detonated it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. By remote?
By remote control. Okay, and we found the car that they detonated it from.
Okay. Natasha, what we've seen here now, we have
police headquarters
Now
on fire.
this is some soldiers on, I think it's that very Clico building that you mentioned, sir, looking towards the Red House.
And
no, they're on top of the Hall of Justice, I think. There.
Hall of Justice. Okay. So this would have been part of the cordon that Brigadier Joseph would have established.
Right there. You can see the Red House is across the road from them.
Yep.
Right. Next, shortman, we have a newspaper clipping, and the shortman I speak of is Hinkson Boris, who is working offside.
Yes.
Ensuring that you see this footage that we're presenting to you here this evening.
The front page of the Daily Express on the 28th of July. Cool. Muslimin shoot way into Parliament. Robinson held hostage. Abu Bakr, revolutionary forces are in command. Which is a very loaded statement and one that I'm sure would have angered.
Mr. Rex Vidali sent his regards, sir. And Rex Vidali, that's the son of deceased Captain Vidali. And
so the next.
He sends his
and I mean, this was I'm sure for civilians who were going about their business and this took place. It was a terrifying time.
Look at that.
To the youngsters who are watching now, you've seen this for the first time.
Aftermath of the looting and burning of
Port of Spain.
Somewhere in Port of Spain. I don't know which street this was.
Yeah, this could be Frederick Street.
Either Henry
it could
Street
be
or...
Yes, because
any one of the streets, they were all looking like that.
Yeah, all of them look unrecognizable at one point.
It looked like a war
zone. We had our hands filled, and it's only after a couple of days that when we had enough troops in that we were able to offer some attention to the looting that was taking place in Port of Spain.
Next eye shot, man. You see, so you had to actually send troops into Port of Spain to make sure that the looting stopped.
Oh, yes.
Wow. Yes. So it was going
on.
on.
Our main focus was, as I said, containment of the Red House and TTT, and once that was done, then we were able to assist the police.
Yep.
Retired Chief Petty.
Look at that. Whatever part of Port of Spain you went, this is what you saw.
Right.
Yep.
Also, Chief Petty Officer Delano Henry sends his regards, sir. And
this would have happened in that period of the state of emergency. So immediately, you think, when did the looting begin?
The looting began, I think, that very Friday night.
Okay.
And I am wondering, a lot of people are wondering when Abu Bakr made his second appearance on TTT, because even though we had knocked him off of Cumberland Hill, TTT was transmitting on two separate channel 2 and 30.
2 and 30, correct.
And I don't know which one of the channels that the transmitter was up at Cumberland Hill. We knocked that one over. He was still able to transmit on the other channel.
Yes.
Where the transmitter was on the highway, off the highway going towards Chaguanas.
Yes, okay.
And Bernard Pantin got in touch with a technician who lived in the area and gave him instructions to go and knock that transmitter off the air.
Yep.
Right? And then once that was done, then we can put it back on.
Yes.
Whenever we needed to.
Right, there's another photo, sir. Yeah. Natasha, what we seen here?
This is Abu Bakr and some of his men having surrendered at TTT. This is the looks like a woman soldier behind Abu Bakr there.
Female soldier?
I feel so. It looks so.
I say good evening to Anthony. Colleen Holder, her father was part of was a hostage, I think, too, as well. As she said, the looting began after Abu Bakr said no looting.
That's what I was about to say that.
Right.
Legacy guy Abu told them no looting, and right. Sandan, Port of Spain looked like Lebanon.
Even if that was another code word for them to go and loot, it just suggested in the minds of people, well, look, we can go and loot.
Yeah.
Right? Another. Bring me here. Bear with me for a moment. Having knocked him off of the 2 television stations, we then set up a television studio in Camp Ogden from where we transmitted.
Right.
From where TTT was able to transmit anytime we wanted to transmit and put the 2 transmitters back on. But more importantly, and this is a key to I think what solved much of the problem for us, is he was still able to use the telephone and talk to Dennis McCormick on 610 Radio 610. All right, he was using that and putting his information out there through that system. And I asked Dennis to not give Abu Bakr any airtime because this is what he wanted.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Yeah. Right. So we have. So this is Special Forces here, sir, who did the rubbing down of the of the insurgent. Right. So Annette said, "Great program, great memories." I'm going to save this video. Sandam, where there was a Hinkson at TTT many years ago. Is it his relation, the short man? Well, short man, you will tell us.
I don't know.
Right, Loma Lockton, I'm hearing these details for the first time. Thanks very much for the information. I was getting ready to go out, saw the firing, the thing on TV, and thought it was a play. I still went. Anna says, yes, look, it looked like a war zone. Good evening, EOD team, retired Ralph Brown. Good evening to you. All right, next short man, next footage, next slide, please.
This next slide is some of the injured persons being removed from the Red House.
If you're just joining us, you're listening to Independency, and we're showing some footage on Facebook, our Facebook page, Independency. So you want to catch some, you got to tune in there quickly. Somebody says, so if only the intelligence unit of the military and special branch of the police had listened and taken my evidence into consideration, then they may. So whoever this is, you have to call me after this program, and because see the incognito names, we try not to go your song like you know what you're talking about here, right? But I'll just read this for reading it because you posted it.
We have up on the screen here now some of the
weaponry,
ammunition and weapons that were recovered in the Red House. By
you had a gander of this too in the Red House. You saw what the Muslimin had in the Red House.
Yes, it's all in there. My tape.
Right.
We found how they brought the weapons in, because after they had surrendered, we got an anonymous tip that the weapons were brought in and were in a warehouse and stored in a warehouse in Trin City. And we located the warehouse, we put some surveillance in it, and after nobody turned up for about 2 days, we broke in. Okay. And all of that footage, I have some footage of that I can show it to you. Okay. What they did is they put some plyboard. Somebody sent them from the United States. I'm trying to remember his name now. He served 2 or 3 years in prison in Orlando in Florida for that. And the bottom 10 or so sheets of plyboard were placed there. They hollowed out the insides of the other 10 or 20, sheets, stored the weapons in there, and then put 10 more sheets of plyboard on top of that.
Okay.
And then they shipped them to Trinidad, and that's how the weapons and the ammunition came in.
Yeah, because people always wondered how the weapons got here.
Well, the weapons, and they were facilitated by a customs officer. And a red flag should have gone up because he left Port of Spain and went to Point Lisas where the shipment came in and facilitated the importation of these sheets of plyboard which came for the Jamaat for the school.
I hope you all dealt with that situation.
Well,
okay. On this picture here we have the Major General himself. At that time your rank was then
was full colonel.
Full colonel, and that was Mr. Winston Dukaran.
Yes, after he was brought out. Yes.
So he was speaking to the press there or something?
Yes, at the Holiday Inn.
Okay, okay.
That's where all the foreign press had gathered, and how they came into Trinidad because the airport was closed, I don't know. They got here CNN and all the other
there were a lot of photographers.
BBC and yes.
BBC had a local
right. Cheryl Gordon. Next slide.
Young officer there.
Cheryl Gordon says this historical info must be repeated ever so often for our youth. They must have a working knowledge of our lives, struggles, and how our present can be tied into our future. This is our story. This is our reality. Cheryl Ann Gordon Thomas. Thank you, Cheryl Ann Gordon Thomas, for your message. Thanks a lot.
This is a photo now in the Weekend Sun on August 17 to 19.
And that's
yes,
Atwell,
Vidal,
Minister
Atwell, Antoine.
Well, he probably was thanking the...
And
oh, by the way, I forget
That's Jotedo in the corner there.
Yes.
I forgot to tell you one of the things. The other West Indian islands.
Next slide.
Had all got together forces, and they had got as far as Barbados.
Okay.
And they too offered to come in. Jamaica, Antigua, Grenada, Guyana, and they had about, I think, 150. But they came in after the Muslim had surrendered. I agreed for them to come in after, because the financial institutions in Trinidad, all the banks and financial houses, refused to open up without military security. And they came in, 150 of them, and they did yeoman service, and they helped get the country going again.
Right. This
and
picture.
They handled that aspect of it.
This picture here is, of course, when the bossman himself came out.
Yes, this is an
Well,
article
he came
from
out
McLean's.
first. He was the first to come out.
Oh, he was the first to come out. Right. And he came out with his rifle. He insisted that.
No. Those were the instructions.
Okay.
They'll all come out with their rifles above their heads.
Okay.
In a certain way.
Right.
With a finger along the trigger guard, and if they came out any other way, they would have been shot.
Okay.
Right.
Next slide.
Then they were ordered by I think it was, I wouldn't call the name, but they were ordered by soldiers outside, the officer outside, to lay down their weapons.
Well, we have a short video of that, so we'll show the public that video in a while. So here we have another slide, Natasha. Anna Robinson Melville.
Yes,
I was
I
on
wonder
duty at Signal Center that fateful day. Thank you, Anna. Thank you for your service.
This is Robinson. Apparently, while he was recuperating after that gunshot wound, he held a puja
Yes.
with members of the Sanatan Dharma Mahasabha, and that's
I'm seeing this for the first time.
Satmaraj on his right, his left, I mean, and other members of the SDMA. He hosted a puja, or they hosted a puja for him. I don't know if people remember this, but this is the first time I was hearing of it.
Both himself and Mr. Richardson were badly beaten.
Yes.
I don't think, well, I have footage of it, and I can show you their faces. You can see they were bloody.
Next slide. All right. So, okay, Ben, my number is 756-6337. That's 756-6337, so you could give me a call. And, of course, your identity will be kept confidential. We work with that rule here as well. So this other slide here would be, this is GIF, or?
Yeah, this should be GIF. I don't know if it will play.
Right. These,
it's just like a montage of soldiers in action.
Sure, man, if it wouldn't play, then go to the next one should be the video.
Yes.
Right. So, hi Beverly from Brooklyn, good evening to you. This was my first year I was going to be able to dance for emancipation. I was about 10. That night I went by my cousin to have my dress sewn, and I never got to dance. I remember we had to be inside by a particular time, as army men would patrol the streets at night. Good evening to you, Gary Gardner, retired warrant officer. Gary Gardner, good evening to you. Bernadette Stewart, good evening. Good evening, Gillian. Colin got in touch with the cadet force as they served in the coup. Right. Just next slide, short one.
That's it. That's the last one. The only one left to play is the video.
Well, the video. Okay, so you could go and play the video now.
Released.
Of the hostages being released. So we have some footage of the hostages being released. So you will see some of that now. And
they actually tried to pass off Muslim Imo too as hostage.
Really?
Yes.
Are you serious?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh my word.
You know
they were fine.
All right. So here's the footage now.
As they came out.
Do you have the
There
audio,
is sound,
Natasha? I thought we had the.
No, it doesn't have much. All of that. No, it's just music behind it, actually.
So here's the footage now. All right, radio audience, we apologize, but we are showing footage of hostages being released from TTT. I thought this when you listened to it had audio.
So no, just.
I give them that.
They call for the preacher and they all
Audio of the footage, but
Mr. and Mrs. Bullet ready did not agree. That whole shotgun wedding was not.
So if you're just joining us, you're listening to Dependency, and we are live on our Dependency Facebook page. And we apologize to the radio audience, but what we're showing here footage of hostages being released from the Red House, from the TTT at first, and then, of course, with under the watchful eye of the soldiers who are frisking them. There's a picture of Raul Pantin coming out with his hand on his head.
Raul never really recovered.
No.
And several others.
I saw people with grocery trolleys filled, hastily moving about, others with fridges on their backs. This is the Imam now coming out with his weapon. Shells and debris from shells hitting the ball. Yes, somebody says on Facebook, I saw people with grocery trolleys filled, hastily moving about, others with fridges on their backs. Impossible but true. They raided the Apang meat outlet, leaving a greedy soul. Wow, leaving a greedy soul in the freezer to die. Or wow, okay. I didn't know about that. Somebody died in the in Lenap, yeah. Kion Woodley said, thanks for informing the younger population of 1990 coup. Give my regards to Major General Ralph Brown. I think this is son of Keith Jilks.
That was this gentleman's name again?
This is Kala Akibua, who listens to our radio program religiously. And I'm sure he's listening now. So I say, good evening to you, Kala. We're just watching a younger version of you going to board the bus to Chagra. So this bus was heading straight to Chagramas?
Yes. Where we set up a prison.
Okay.
We actually had to declare the prison at what we used to call L15.
L15, right. And these were young soldiers. I'm seeing some really young soldiers. Looking at another insurgent now disrobing, of course, under the instructions from. But we were hearing the instructions, Natasha.
Yeah, we were. The Facebook audience would be hearing it.
So, man, you have any audio with this? I honestly thought it had audio. God, the USS Theodore Roosevelt contacted the Coast Guard on their command frequency, inquiring if we wanted any assistance. And that was from Captain Derek Lamb. So I guess Theodore Roosevelt, Derek Lamb, he was a soldier and he went across to Coast Guard. And this
people have, I think, just watching this footage it brings up some very strong emotions for me personally. As a citizen of Trinidad and Tobago, these are not images of my country that I like to see. I'm not enjoying this at all, and I'm sure that a lot of people have mixed emotions about how this ended and how the insurgents have been allowed to walk free and not having to pay for the crimes that they committed against the state.
But we're not hearing it on this end, so I don't know, we have to fix that for the next time.
I personally, I am quite offended by this. I don't know how we as a nation have. I think that's part of the reason why we have not been able to surmount
Lila Alexander,
the kind of
sorry,
trauma
Natasha.
that the kind of. This is, to me, it's part of the reason why we haven't been able to surmount the trauma that a lot of people experienced during these events.
That is so, and a lot of people are still hurting. A lot of the hostages.
Yes.
It still lives with them. I mean, I remember. I know Raul. Raul was my good friend, and Raul has never really recovered until the day he died. He's probably at peace now. But Raul. If you dropped a pen next to Raul, he would be jumping.
Alva Shockness, Keith Andre Claude was arrested in Miami in relation to the coup arms. He claimed one Lance Fire Small was his contact in Trinidad for Trinidad and Tobago arms. Okay. Retired Warrant Officer Gary Gardner Good evening, my brother. I was enjoying football at the stadium when we got the page to report to Camp Ogden. On the second day, I was assigned signaller to Major General Ralph Brown. Okay, that's young Gardner at the Hilton Hotel. Good evening, sir. He sends his regards to you.
Evening, Gardner.
Telesford, he made a mess of C20, and I agree with Natasha. Ham radio operators were active, passing information stateside. I was working at station in the Pacific, and he asked me what the hell I was doing on the air as he heard of the coup too. I was using Morse code. This is some guy puts my name of Legacy Guy. Okay, so we take your call. We just have about 8 more minutes. So just for some quick calls, if you have any questions, or make it short, please make it quick. For the Major General, I just wanted to throw in this, folks, that so you know, I've interacted with these gentlemen,
the insurgents,
the Imam, Kala, and you know, just like Rafiq Shah, just like Che Guevara, just like some of the people who decided they were going to make a decision to take up arms against the state. And they too know that they could have lost their lives in so doing. Now, as I said, as a radio journalist, you know, I have to sometimes throw the cat among the pigeons. Now, to some people, he's a villain. Then to some others, he's a hero, just like Rafiq Shah, just like these other gentlemen I would have called. So, but the regiment, on the other hand, it had nothing personal. You all had a job to do. And you all did, you know, just like I told Luke the same thing. That it wasn't anything personal against you with Rafiq Shah and Lou Jones, and you all were just caught in that. But you, as a regiment, you had your job to do.
Well, we have a military unit here. It's a very good unit. And in the military, you don't pick sides. You don't.
No.
You serve whoever is the government that is in power, and you take an oath to defend the Constitution and the law of Trinidad and Tobago. And anybody who attempts to breach those things, well, then you
let's take our first call. 622-3937. Hello, good evening.
Good evening, yes.
Good evening.
I've just turned the radio on here. I'm sorry, yes. But Natasha asked why these people were not punished. Did all you talk about the amnesty?
Say again?
The amnesty.
The amnesty.
Yes, we did speak about
it. Yes.
Amnesty, yes. And it was challenged also at the Privy Council.
Yes.
And they won it also.
Yes.
So,
well, they didn't.
It was properly well planned that before they went in. Yes. They properly well planned that, and there was something similar to like that in the Fiji Islands with George Speight, who make him sign amnesty. He also did the same thing, just like what did here. Go and check out that George Speight thing in the Fiji Island with that same amnesty business.
All right, caller. Thank you very much. Thank you for calling. We have to. Lydia Johnson said, I lived in West Africa and saw it on TV. Who suggested the amnesty? I never understood that part. There's some question about it. 622-3937. Good evening.
Hello. Good evening.
Good evening.
Empathy. Yes. The amnesty was suggested in Parliament from the opposition, and they facilitated the copies coming for the Muslimin to take it to the court.
Not the opposition, sir. It was Mr. John Humphrey.
Yeah, well, right.
He was not opposition. He was a government minister.
Right. No, when I say opposition, I mean splinter of the government. Then you understand?
Yes.
They came as opposition. You know. Yeah. They came as opposition, so they took it.
I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much. Because what we heard to it had one set of ministers for and
there
one
was a
set
sort
of
of divide.
And that
would have been part of the plan
too.
of the insurgents as well, to divide the
Hello, good evening.
sitting government.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen.
Good evening.
Major General, in the 1990 Independence Honors, wasn't the force given an award? I can't recall what the award was.
The Trinity Cross.
Right. Because I was always wondering how come, your award wasn't Trinity across as well. Because what I'm saying is that everybody who stood at that time, I feel like they should get a Trinity course. I'm thinking that going forward, for gallantry and service to country, that should just be a gold medal. It shouldn't be no bronze or silver thing, because we don't recognize the debt that was owed to the country by the part you and your men played. I must say that the events of 1990 would have spurred myself and many other young men to join military service, whether it was the police service, the fire service, the prison service. And I enlisted in 1991 in our Armed National Security, and I served for 28 years. I want to say that it was because of the courage shown by you gentlemen. And in fact, I had applied to be a soldier in 1990 and reached as far as the interview, and I didn't get through.
When this happened?
And that spurred me on to go on to still contribute and serve the country.
Right. So the government did mint a medal, which all soldiers, sailors, airmen, policemen, firemen, they all got a medal for the
commemorative medal.
A commemorative medal. Yes.
Thanks for your service, and thanks for the record, because I was 20 years old at the time, and it was something else. I couldn't believe what I was doing. But
thank you very
again,
much.
I'm looking forward to the rest of the series. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. All right. So Captain Lam again says that soldier directing Abu after he surrendered was my batch 4156 Hosford. I thought it looked like Hosford. He just said thank you for clearing that up, sir. Major General, there are certain military personnel who kept me psychologically alive, and one is Brigadier Peter Joseph and the other is Colonel Vidal. We can't take any more calls, so we have to give you the final word as we get ready to wrap up, because we have a broadcast across to in a while. So thank you very much for coming, and let's have the final word from you on this whole issue and how you feel today.
Well, the final word is I would like to see something to be done to commemorate this event. I know it's as difficult as it is, but it's part of our history. And like the mutiny in 1970, we can't hide it. It's just part of the history. And they should have an annual event that commemorates this.
That we should never forget. That will help us to not ever forget.
Thanks to all the soldiers, sailors, airmen, and policemen, other arms of the service, other protective services that came to the fore and performed remarkably well during that period of time.
Right. All right, sir. Thank you once again. Thank you
so
all
much.
of you who tuned in and locked on Facebook. Again, this is the start of the series of Colleen Hola. Great show as always. Garth and Natasha, thanks very much for shedding some more light on this chapter of TNT history. Thank you, Colleen, and thank your father for his service too as well. Folks, Natasha, this was a good start, you think?
Yeah, good start. We open any button with this thing, and remember, people, the day or the days may have passed, but we still in the year of commemorating 30th anniversary, so we will continue. And
there's a picture on Facebook of the Major General Ralph Brown. He's now retired.
Regalia.
Yes, that's him in full ceremonial gear.
Yes.
And you were Chief of Defence Staff then?
Yes, I was.
Yeah. That's right. That's him as Chief of Defence Staff.
Look at my epaulette, you can tell.
Yes, that's why I was watching it now. I say, that was when he was Chief of Defence Staff. Okay. So, well, again, sir, thank you very much.
I know who's not calling here, you know.
That is Mr. Nurse. Mr. Nurse, actually.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. A retired Warrant Officer Class 1 Modest Gilbert. Yes. Barbell, I'm sure he's listening and he will call me right after. Okay, folks, so thank you very much. Once again, stay tuned for our broadcast. And our friend Harvey Boris has a late night on Facebook starting 9 o'clock. Well, let's check Harvey on Facebook too. What? But yeah, Harvey has a late show now on Facebook. Right, so sir, God bless you. Thank you very much for your service. You know, we always stay close.
Thank you for having me, and you and Natasha are doing a great job. Keep it up.
Natasha, thank you. Cameron,
who's
searching for Kerr.
All of you tuned in on Facebook and on radio.
Our Facebook family, love you as usual.
Yes.
Talk to you next week, please God. No, let me tell you before you said next week, please God, we have the British High Commissioner in studio with us.
Yes.
So we have to just break stride for a bit, and then we go right back and continue in part 2 of the 1990 series. All right. So God bless you all. Be safe, please, out there, people. Please be safe. Observe the protocols. Do the right thing. Yes. God bless you all. Take care. Bye bye.
Good night.
Eye on Dependency, where every life is a biography. On the Eye, 95.5, the most influential name in radio.
Polling day would be August 10th, 20.